And we are on part two here on judgments. This is Guido King. This is the Unsearchable Riches. This is volume 51, issue number 6. I'm just going to dive on in here. This feels like one large article because there's barely any titles for it. Like, this is the most that you're going to get in terms of title, past and future judgments, but he'll get to both. So, continuing on, the fiery judgments of Sodom and Gomorrah. In the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, we had an example of a judgment of a special group of men, Genesis 19, verses 24 to 28. The basis for this judgment is stated in Ezekiel 16:49. Behold, this came to be the depravity of Sodom. Pomp, surfeiting with bread, and to quiet ease came to be hers and her daughters. Yet the hand of the humble and needy she did not hold fast. And haughty are they, doing abhorrences before me. Yeah, and I shall take them away as you see. So before I get started here, I want to make something that's completely unrelated. Has nothing to do with this. Just give me 5 seconds. Maybe slightly more than 5 seconds, but it's okay. It's close. That works. Okay. A life of superabundance is never good for anyone. It invariably leads to soft living, accompanied by wantonness, selfishness, and fleshly lusts, which draw men down into the swamp of immorality. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah amply demonstrate the depths of depravity to which this can lead. They became evil and sinners against Yahweh Elohim exceedingly. Genesis 13:13. Abram's nephew Lot was living among these depraved men. Although his walk did not approach the standard of his uncle Abram, the scriptures affirm his comparatively good character. Peter writes, God rescues just Lot, harried by the behavior of the dissolute in their wantonness. For the just man dwelling among them, in observing and hearing from day to day, tormented his just soul by their lawless acts. The Lord is acquainted with the rescue of the devout out of trial. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 7 through 9. God rescued Lot out of this judgment. That's a type of us receiving justification. Wow. He warned him through messengers and bade him flee with his family. But when he told his sons-in-law of the impending catastrophe, he became in their eyes as one making fun. Genesis 19:14. As in the days of Noah, those who failed to heed the warning were doomed by their own disbelief. While God used water as the destructive element in the flood, he now destroys the sinners of these cities by a rain of fire and sulfur. In a lot of Christian media, we use this. This is used, I guess, and uses this as a way to try and excuse eternal torment because, like, God used fire in this judgment. So let's take a moment here and look at how God actually uses fire and sulfur. In view of the many pits of asphalt found at their supposed sites, we can well imagine the destructiveness of that fire. The Dead Sea, with its chemical contents that probably bordered these doomed cities, is a present day proof of the severity of the divine judgment of a place which had been poisoned and corrupted by sin. The scriptures often make reference to this terrible retribution, both to illustrate the fierce judgment which confirmed criminals should be expecting and to serve as a warning to them. When Israel's apostasy increased, she was likened by God to Sodom and Gomorrah and was threatened with an equally severe chastisement. Deuteronomy 29:23 and Amos 4:11. Other wayward and stubborn people have also been warned that such judgments were in store for them. Babel, Isaiah 13:19, Edom in Jeremiah 49:17 and 18, Moab in Zephaniah 2:9 are examples. Thus, Sodom and Gomorrah continue to bear mute testimony to the fact that a life in sin will always arouse God's indignation and be followed by heavy affliction. And in the fast approaching era of the end, the earth will become just as wicked and sinful as Sodom and Gomorrah in their day, and thus call down God's indignation on the day in which the Son of Mankind is to be unveiled. Luke 17, verses 28 through 30. Wow. So, as we see, it is a specific and temporary time. It may not be an exact day, but it is or in a 24-hour sense, but it is 100% a time period with a beginning and an end, not some place of eternal fiery torture. Sodom and Gomorrah, which is just not around today, it is over with. The judgment is not still occurring, is far more just in its limit. We must not overlook the fact that God's word teaches us additional lessons through this judgment. From Abram's intercession, we learn that a devout man can become a blessing even to the wicked. Genesis 18, verses 23 through 33. His entreaties resulted in God's promise to spare the entire city if 10 righteous men could be found within its walls, but not even 10 just persons could be found. Note that this is not on human merit. Another very important teaching concerning the ruin of that whole district is revealed to us by the prophet Ezekiel. And reverse do I their captivity, the captivity of Sodom and her daughters, and your sister Sodom and her daughters shall return to their former state. In Ezekiel 16, verses 53 to 55. This return to their former state cannot mean anything else but a resurrection to the life they once had. This does not imply their salvation and reconciliation, but refers to the resurrection for judgment, as other passages of scriptures prove. Read one more time. This return to their former state cannot mean anything else but a resurrection to the life they once had. This does not imply their salvation or reconciliation, but refers to their resurrection for judgment, as other passages of scripture prove. This salvation and reconciliation, this is Paul's burden. This is Paul's burden. Of course, if all you focus on is the Old Testament, then of course you will only think of this here. So here is an early indication of a deeper purpose prompting God's inflictions. Sodom was destroyed without grace and mercy. Yet this catastrophe is later followed by the revelation that punishment is not God's final purpose for the criminals he judges. What a precious discovery to find that God's judgments are not an end in themselves. They are but a necessary stopping place on the road to his goal, from whence he moves on toward the grand and glorious fulfillment of all that his loving heart desires. The death of Egypt's firstborn. The death of Egypt's firstborn and the drowning of Egypt's army in the waters of the Terminal Sea were brought about by serious sins against Yahweh, the God of Israel, and his people. The law that all enemies and tormentors of his own chosen race will be punished is valid throughout the entire history of mankind, even when the sentence is not executed immediately. Pharaoh did not take the divine warning seriously at first, but stubbornly withstood God's orders. This human resistance to God's will and its consequent judgment was not only intended to bring about the chastisement of the offenders, but served another purpose as well. His main object was to display his supreme power and to publish his name in the entire earth. Exodus 9:16, Romans 9:17. These powerful doings were intended to teach his people to fear him. The Israelites were told to explain it to their children. Then you make it known to your sons, saying, on dry ground crossed Israel this Jordan. For dried up by Yahweh, your Elohim, were the waters of the Jordan before your face, till you cross, as did Yahweh, your Elohim, through the Terminal Sea, which Yahweh dried up before our faces, till we cross, that all the people of the earth may know the hand of Yahweh, that it is steadfast, that you may fear Yahweh, your Elohim, all your days. Joshua 4, verses 22 to 24. From this, we can see that God's judgments are not only an exhibition of his indignation, but also a display of his power, and both form a part of his revelation. God's judgments of Israel. The history of Israel in the Promised Land is an unbroken chain of failures and judgments. On one occasion, we note punishments of individuals or groups of persons, while at other times, the entire people, as well as other nations, are corrected. These judgments follow one another so rapidly that one might give this portion of the scriptures the title, Book of the Divine Judgments. These accounts, in their entirety, form an impressive commentary on Isaiah's declaration. Yahweh is an Elohim of judgment. Chapter 30, verse 18 of Isaiah. Verily, Israel had to learn that God does not leave sin unpunished. A study of these inflictions is quite worthwhile and sharpens our spiritual perception, although we find ourselves living in an entirely different administration. We are in the 9th administration. This is under the 5th administration. Such a study deepens our realization of God's holiness and the inflexibility of his law under which Israel lived. Thus, through Israel's history, we learn that the God of love does not hesitate to bring dire judgments on his own when they stray from his ways. This is for their own sake. God's various means of correction. In executing his judgments, God may proceed in two distinct ways, direct or indirect. These two means of inflicting the evil that he deems necessary, either directed by his own hand or indirectly through his appointed instruments, are put before our eyes in a clear and instructive way throughout Israel's entire history. Nadab and Abihu, Aaron's sons, who brought strange fire into the presence of Yahweh, were judged for their disobedience directly by Yahweh himself. Leviticus 10, 1-4. Also, the spies, whose lack of confidence made Israel faint-hearted, died for their cowardliness by direct divine action. Numbers 14, verses 36 and 37. In like manner, God smote the false prophet Hananiah, who spoke from himself rather than speaking the truth of God. He died in the same year. Jeremiah 28, verses 1-17. God also used extraordinary inflictions to carry out his retributive justice. He said that he would send 4 evil judgments, sword, famine, evil animals, and the plague against Jerusalem in order to cut off man and beast. Ezekiel 14:21. And in Jeremiah 29:18, he threatens them, and I pursue after them sword, with famine, and with plague. After David's unlawful numbering of Israel, God smote 70,000 men with the pestilence. 2 Samuel 24:15. Wow. When he had consumed the 250 men who had rebelled with Korah, and the people murmured, he punished them with a plague by which 14,700 died. Number 16, verses 41-50. Another account tells us that 24,000 died who had joined themselves to Baal Peor. Verse 25. I think that's like verses 1-9 at least, thus kindling the anger of Yahweh against Israel. Thus, God has often proved that he does not shrink from executing the most severe judgments, and if, in some cases, he uses men to carry them out, it is not because he is too weak or too merciful to do it himself. There were even occasions when certain Israelites were ordered to strike their own relatives. When the people had worshipped the golden calf, Moses summoned the faithful ones, and every one of them was ordered to slay his brother, his associate, and his neighbor. Exodus 32, verses 26 and 27. In this connection, we should also mention the judgment of Achan. He was stoned and burned together with his sons, his daughters, and his cattle, and all his possessions. Joshua 7, verses 1-26. Occasions arose when Israel was ordered to attack disobedient Judah, while at other times the reverse was the case. Thus, during the reign of Jeroboam, God gave the apostate 10 tribes into the hands of Abijah. Abijah. I don't listen to many preachers, so I don't really listen to the way some of these things are supposed to be pronounced. If anyone wants to take a crack at it, I'll listen. Will I heed? Maybe, maybe not, but know how it goes. Nevertheless, Abijah, the king of Judah, and 500,000 chosen men of Israel's army were slain. 2 Chronicles 13, verses 15, 17. Yet when Ahaz reigned over Judah and Jerusalem and did that which was wicked in God's sight, as had the kings of Israel, God gave Judah into the hand of Pekah, king of Israel, who slew 120,000 men in one day, because they had forsaken Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers. 2 Chronicles 28, verses 1 through 6. We're gonna take a brief break here. I'm just gonna use the bathroom real quick. I really have to go. I should have done that a little sooner, but my fault. Hey Keith, how you doing? Welcome back. So, okay, let's press on here. Sorry about that. The nations as scourges for Israel. Yet it was even more humiliating and shameful for Israel when God gave them into the hands of their enemies in order to execute his just judgment. This happened quite often. In the book of Judges, we have one case after another. We can get a glimpse of one such judgment by reading Judges 2, verses 13 through 15, along with nearby passages. When the Philistines slaughtered 4,000 men of Israel, the elders fetched the Ark of the Covenant in hopes of delivering themselves from the Philistines, yet they were defeated and the Ark was captured by the enemy. 1 Samuel 4, verses 1 through 11. Man, that's crazy. The two nations which were used more than any others to humble Israel were Assyria and Babylonia. To them was assigned the task of leading God's people into captivity. Yay! In order to prevent these judgments from being attributed to the continual wars that raged among the nations that surrounded Palestine, God predicted them and announced their purpose beforehand through the prophets. Isaiah warned Israel that God would bring the king of Assyria upon them. Isaiah 7, verses 17 to 20, while he often threatened the disobedient people with the Babylonian captivity. Jeremiah 20, verse 4, and others. And it all came to pass. Israel, the 10 tribes, was deported to Assyria under King Shalmaneser. 2 Kings 18, verses 9 through 12. Nearly a century later, the first prisoners of Judah were brought to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. 2 Chronicles 36. More soon followed. Jerusalem was destroyed. When we remember the blessings this nation had once enjoyed, we perceive dimly what frightful sufferings and hardships these judgments brought upon them. But why all this? Jeremiah gives the answer. For on account of the anger of Yahweh, it came to be in Jerusalem and Judah until he flings them from his presence. Jeremiah 52, verse 3. Israel's derision of God's patience. But Israel's disobedience, which drew down God's wrath on their heads, is not the end of this sad story. God did not react immediately with punishment when his people sinned against him, but patiently bore with them. It was the important task of his ancient prophets to warn the erring people of the impending judgment. Their scrolls are full of passionate appeals to heed his threats before it was too late. One would think that the apostate nation would take God's fervent pleadings to heart. Joel 2, verses 12 through 17. Alas, to the sin of forsaking Yahweh, they heaped the offense of casting his patient warnings to the winds. Satan's success in denying the divine judgments was as successful here as in the Garden of Eden. Most ardent imitators of God's adversary in this respect were the false prophets of Israel. By soothing serenity or vehement negation, they tried to make light of the seriousness of God's indignation. When Yahweh threatened his disobedient people with the sword, with famine, and with pestilence, the prophet Jeremiah cried to him in great sorrow, Alas, my Lord Yahweh, behold, their prophets prophesy and are saying to them, You shall not see the sword, and famine shall not come to you, for a true peace will I give you in this place. Jeremiah 14, verses 12 to 13. Yet in order to lull the people with vain hopes, they went even further. God himself repeated one of their misleading statements, saying, are they to those spurning me? Speak, does Yahweh, welfare is coming to you. And to everyone going in the controls of his own heart, they say, Not on you shall come evil. Jeremiah 23:17. Yet the peak of their blasphemy was reached when they said, Everyone doing evil is good in the sight of Yahweh, and he delighted in them. Or, where is the Elohim of judgment? Like they're in open opposition to him. It's no better than Cain's descendants, Cain 4, the end of the end of Genesis 4. And this is Malachi 2:17. As had the adversary in Eden, these deceivers denied the threatened afflictions and promised the sinning people a wonderful future. But they did not do it because they were tender-hearted, noble motives, wishing to spare them. They spoke thus because they craved power, even as their God, Satan, when he deluded Eve. One need only read Ezekiel 34, verses 1 through 22, see how cruelly and brutally they treated the people. God threatens these prophets through his true servant Micah. Thus says Yahweh concerning the prophets who are leading my people astray, who bite with their teeth and cry, peace, which he is not putting in their mouths, and they hallow a war against them. Wherefore night is it for you without a vision, and dark is it for you without divining, and setting is the sun on the prophets, and somber on them is the day. And ashamed are the vision seers of the dreams, and abashed are the diviners, and they muffle up the upper lip, all of them. For no answer is there from Elohim. Micah 3, 5-7. Good. This was the state of the men who denied God's judgments on sin and disobedience, desiring to act as judges themselves. Yet sadder still, the people believed them and ignored God's true prophets. My people love to have it so, Yahweh had to say with lamenting. Jeremiah 5:31. Well, I mean, yeah, you're giving bad news all day. But it is necessary news. He's telling the truth. Lo, how patient was God to Israel. And Yahweh, the Elohim of their fathers, sent to them by his messengers, rising up early and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. 2 Chronicles 36, verse 15. But the next verse shows the depths to which they had sunk. But they mocked the messengers of Elohim and despised his words and misused his prophets, until the wrath of Yahweh rose against his people, till there was no remedy. Thus we see that there are two serious sins which hurled Israel into destruction. When they strayed from God's precepts, they began their downward trek. Yet when they mocked his warnings and with wicked words scoffed at his gracious entreaties, they proved themselves despisers of God. So we see that for every frivolous sinner and for all who would mock God's grace, Israel has become an uplifted finger. Warning, be not deceived. God is not to be sneered at, for whatsoever a man may be sowing, this shall he be reaping also. Galatians 6:7. And this from our own apostle. It's very important that we do not take his word for granted. He says we're justified. We are justified. He says we are no longer being judged. We should accept that we are no longer being judged. It isn't even like when we are said to judge the other. Fortunately, I've seen that. I've seen that play out. A lot of people have thrown anyone who realizes Christ's existence before his physical birth out of Christ. That they're not Trinitarian, that they don't have faith, or that it's canceled out by this. It's truly depressing, because in the meantime, God is saying the fact in Paul's evangel. He's giving it to us. He's giving us the answers that Israel wishes it could have. And yet we are told to consider things from Israel's perspective, as if Israel has some knowledge or some bountiful understanding that God himself cannot give us directly. We have Israel's erroneous attitude towards the nations. In another direction, also, Israel's inability to understand God's motives in judging becomes evident. When they entered the promised land, they were ordered to destroy the nations living there. These nations were so completely enslaved by Satan and had sunk into each a mire of sin and wickedness that God's people would have been doomed to sink in the same morass. In order to prevent this, God ordered their quick extermination. But Israel failed to grasp its place as Yahweh's purifying agent and allowed some of these corrupt nations to remain in the land. It was not long before they found that these heathen became hedge thorns in their eyes and target points in their sides. This is why we shouldn't just stop at, oh, well, we're saved though, so who cares about any other teaching? Because the other teachings that exist are there to defend the salvation and secure the understanding of it. But it was not long before you find that the things you're ignoring become headstones and end up fooling you. Numbers 33:55. Strange as it may seem, Israel, on other occasions, fell into the opposite extreme. They begrudged the other nations as a share in God's grace. An instructive example is the prophet Jonah. At first, he refused to call the Ninevites to repentance. Turd. So Yahweh severely chastised him by putting him into the belly of a sea monster. Finally, he went to the threatened city, yet became angry when Nineveh heeded his warning and repented of its evil. Yes, he actually became indignant when this great city was not destroyed. And God gave his erring prophet another lesson through the withered castor oil plant, and so justified his mercy with the 120,000 citizens and their cattle. Jonah's disposition was much the same as that shown by the entire nation towards aliens. This is evident from the way they treated the strangers who dwelt in their midst. God, with loving consideration, also had these people in his heart. Exodus 22:21, 23:9, Jeremiah 7:6, 22:3, Zechariah 7, verse 10. But what was Israel's attitude? Yahweh hurls this accusation into their faces. Over the humble and needy they tyrannize. From the sojourner they extort with no judgment. Ezekiel 22:29. God's chosen people, separated to be a channel of his blessings to the other nations, were consistently a curse to all. Proud, cold, and cruel, they looked down on the other nations and were elated at their own privileged position, hoping to hoard all the blessing for themselves. But this was not according to God's purpose. Such an attitude poisoned them like venom and eventually led to the judgment, callousness. How like the human heart to take such a selfish attitude. No wonder it is difficult for mankind to understand the divine judgments, take the proper attitude toward them. It says M. Jaegel, to be continued. Thank you so much to God for giving us this reading. Much appreciated. A few more things here for Keith. Let me see. Could or did anyone ever tell God they wanted to do the wrong thing and their hearts weren't in it, but ask for his help or whatever need be to change it? I don't know if I understand the question. Could or did anyone ever tell God they wanted to do the wrong thing and their hearts weren't in it? I mean, probably. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head in the Bible, but I mean, just from human psychology, where human beings will say, I'm going to do this because I'm mad at you, even if their heart's not in it. I mean, we do that with other people. It's a pretty solid chance that a number of us have done it to God, if not all of us. I'd be surprised if all of us. But at the same time, God is not, he's not gonna like, oh my God, you got me there. No, it's not like anything new. So if they're trying to take control of his help by threatening to do something otherwise, I'm confident that God's not moved by that. There's no partiality with God, Romans 2:11. But if they were genuine and really needed help, then yeah, he would probably be molding them exactly the way he needs to. And yeah, that would in itself be leading to change of heart. Somewhere there's change of mind. So Sorry, he'll take a stand. When one does not want to repent but knows they should. I'm sure that's human experience as well. I'm sure God's dealt with that justly. So yeah, I got nothing else really to add. Um, the divine judgment's so helpful to know what God is doing in His judgments. Again, this is a topic that is served to backdrop the evangel, not conclude the evangel. Uh, it is the background, the dark background on which the evangel shines. It's not the conclusion, the end goal, the expectation by any measure. That does not make sense. Uh, People telling you that are seeking to subvert your expectation. Nobody should be listening to any teacher that would say such a bald-faced lie about God, unequivocally lying. From here, we'll move into part three. I will either do this tomorrow or I will do this on Friday evening. I work a double tomorrow, but really depends on how busy it is at work. Work has been uh, endurance test. So is it busy? Is it not busy? So we'll cross that line when we get there. Anyways, grace and peace to y'all.